Welcome, Coach.
Thanks, John.
How are you,
Excited to
brother?
be here. Man, I am fired up. Excited to be here.
So we're settling in over there in Miami, I take it, right?
Yes, just like we moved right in the middle of the pandemic. Like, who does that, right? Got off the airplane, and uh, I think one day later they locked it down. We were still staying in a hotel and moved right in the middle of it.
Wow. Yeah, so tell people you were at Arizona, but kind of walk us through the coaching journey, if you will.
Oh, wow. Okay, we got time?
We do. We have some time.
All right. So I went to Mississippi State, and right out of college, I decided I majored in math, and I wanted to be a math teacher and a high school football coach. And so I went to a place called West Point High School, which is right outside of Starkville, Mississippi. And first guy that ever hired me was Coach Bubba Davis, one of my favorite people in this entire world. And I did that for 2 years. And after being a school teacher for 2 years, I decided I never wanted to do that again. That's why I have all the respect in the world for teachers across the country.
Amen.
And so absolutely. And so I went to the University of North Alabama with a guy named Bobby Wallace. And we experienced a lot of success there in 1992 through 1997. We won 3 straight national championships. And then he got the head coaching job at Temple University. So I went up to Temple University, and we were running the triple option at the time and doing really well. But when we got up to Temple, Coach Wallace wanted to go to the air raid offense. I'm sure you've heard that term. And Hal Mumme was the head coach at Kentucky at the time. And Coach Bobby told me to go down to Kentucky and learn that offense. And while I was down there, I met Mike Leach. I met Tony Franklin. I met Sonny Dykes. They were all down there. And that's how I kind of got into the family of the air raid. And I went to a couple 1AA schools outside of Temple. I went to Southeast Missouri State for 2 years. And then I went to Central Connecticut State for 4 years. And then Sonny Dykes hired me at Louisiana Tech. And then kind of from there, just kind of took off. We did really well there. And then we went to Cal Berkeley, had a guy named Jared Goff as our quarterback, first pick in the drafts, experienced a lot of success there. And then I kind of went out on my own and wanted to be an offensive coordinator. I went to Kansas for a couple years and then ended up at Arizona State. And then just got the job here at Miami.
You know, I was actually born in West Point, Mississippi.
Come on.
No, I'm serious. Is that crazy? Because here's the thing is most people have no idea where West Point, Mississippi is either. Yeah, I was born in West Point, Mississippi.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah,
right.
It is. You know, interesting story too I got about Coach Leach. I was in Lubbock years ago. Used to travel out there for work, and I was in an Outback Steakhouse one night eating dinner late, and this older couples sitting behind me were just harassing Texas, giving the state of Texas a hard time. I'm thinking they realize they're in Lubbock, right? Long story short, I lean over, start talking to them, and they start talking about Coach Leach and how I think he was he a Stoops protege? Did he come up through Bob Stoops? And
he worked 1 year as the offense coordinator at Oklahoma.
Okay. I knew there was a connection there somewhere. And I promise you, 5 minutes later, one of them leans over and looks out to the lobby and says, "Hey, Coach Leach." And it was Leach, his wife, and his parents. The guy proceeded to come back in there, and he stood there and talked to us for an hour. The nicest guy in the world. Just super
really
nice guy. Yeah. And sure enough, dude, one of the old men goes, "Hey, Coach, I got to play for you." And I'm like, oh, my gosh.
That's what you want to hear when you're out eating. I got to play for you.
The thing is, he was so nice. He was like, "All right, let me hear it." Yeah. And then he starts telling the story about this fancy play or some trick play. Really, really good guy. So tell me you mentioned as being a father and your kind of story of that journey. Tell me a little bit about that. I know you said you had some miscarriages and just the journey and what God taught you through that.
Yes. Oh man. What he taught me was that we can have our own plans and you can want something, but man, you so bad you could want something and pray, and you just eventually, if it's not happening, you got to give it up and just give it to God, you know. And we had several miscarriages and just had the hardest time um, trying to have a child, and then eventually we did. And I told you the story about my son Cutter. We named him after Mariano Rivera's cut fastball because he's told a story about how God gave him that pitch, and we felt that way in the hospital when we found out we had to do in vitro and all of that stuff, and had to go through that whole process. And when we found out that Sonny was pregnant, I knew that's what I wanted to call him because God gave him to us.
Dude, that's the studliest name for a boy I think I've ever heard. That is such a great name. I love it. And you know what, too? The whole journey of a miscarriage, we went through a couple of miscarriages before we had kids, and we had trouble getting pregnant and all of that stuff. And it was amazing, though. Once we had a miscarriage, we started talking to people. It's like everybody we talked to had a miscarriage or knew somebody or whatever. And it was like, then you realize just how common it was or is.
That's right. That you're exactly right.
Let's talk about your father and the influence that he had on you. How did he influence you as a dad?
So the whole story about my dad, he left when I was 4 years old, was out of my life. And I kind of grew up. Like I said, I loved your movie, the video. I could speak days on the father wound, the pain and the anger that you have inside of you, and you don't know where it's coming from, and the pressure you feel of having to accomplish something so that you feel like you're worthy. Like maybe my dad will like me if I do this, or if I can do this, or if I can accomplish this. But in a way, it's through all of those experiences kind of it helped form who I am, the resolve that I have, the stubbornness that I have to succeed. Like, man, like it takes me a while to quit now. I'm not going to quit.
Yeah.
When I get after something. But later on, I moved down and lived with my dad in my high school years. My 9th grade year was a mess, total mess. Matter of fact, I flunked the 9th grade on purpose, just out of anger. I don't even know who I was getting back, but I was getting somebody back. But my mom just kind of like, you need to go live with your dad. So I moved down and lived with my dad in Mississippi. And that's when I started playing high school football. But my dad was just a distant guy. His father did not grow up with a father. He had no idea how to be a great dad, right? And so really, once I got to Cal Berkeley, later on, I had a 35-minute drive to work every day. And so I called him almost every morning. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to talk to my dad every day. And man, John, I wouldn't give those 2 years back for nothing in the world. And I developed a relationship with my dad. I got to know him, his heart, where he never let me in before. We had just great conversations, and I got to know him right there towards the end. But how he influenced me, my dad never complained. He worked 40 years without a day off, and never like wanted to take days off, never was sick. He was always dependable in that way as a worker. He taught me that. He was a tough dude. He was a tough guy. And, really that is one of the things that I learned from him was the resolve, the toughness, never give up. The name on the back of your jersey means something. Being on time, doing the job, right. And for everybody to see that it's good and it's not lazy. Those were the type of things that I learned from my dad.
You know what, Coach, and you mentioned the anger piece, and
Yes.
as you watched the movie, you could tell that was me too. And I run into so many guys, and I talk about this at length, that are angry and they can't even tell you why, right? They just know they're angry and they're pissed off at something, somebody, doesn't matter. And as you began to hear more stories about your dad and get to know him and find out ultimately, I guess maybe he didn't have a father or his father wasn't there for him.
Right. He was not around. His dad died early, and he didn't have a dad.
So was it in that? I know for me, in my story, it was learning and knowing that, coming to realize that my dad couldn't give what he didn't have, right? And so God used that to soften my heart and give me a compassion for my dad, where once I used to refer to him as a coward, and I would just angrily, but after that forgiveness and God changed my life through that, it was like I have this endearing, incredible love and compassion for him now.
Oh, no, absolutely. You're gonna make me cry, John. I mean, I just like it's and isn't it just a relief? It frees you up to be the man, the person that God created you to be when you let go of all of that stuff, man. Mine was in a almost like I became a Christian before I really kind of got to know my dad. I became a Christian in 1993 when I was off at the University of North Alabama. And man, it was almost like overnight, John. God healed that wound in me. And he was like, listen, I know that you're wanting something, you're missing something, but I can feel that for you. And God literally, once he came into my life, he filled that for me, which freed me up to just go, I didn't hold anything against my dad after that. It didn't even like faze me. It didn't bother me at all, because I knew that I had everything I needed from my Heavenly Father.
There's one story I'll never forget with my mom, and she had told me about this picture that we had taken when me and my two brothers were very young, and my dad was in prison. And I was like, what? I'd never seen that picture. Didn't remember. We go back to her house. I look at it, and I remember getting so emotional looking at this picture, looking at my dad in prison with these three boys, young boys. I'm a baby, and just thinking, I felt so sad. And I was like, okay, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I wish so badly my dad would have known about the fatherhood, would have known this whole thing, the epidemic, and would have been able to forgive his father who wasn't there and who had died early, just like yours. So, dude, it's I love the story, and it's such a great testimony. The forgiveness, just that burden that gets lifted, and the freedom that comes from that, bro. Is that not just the most incredible thing?
It really is. And man, I just got to point this out because the story, and this is like my greatest story in the Bible is the prodigal son. And like Jesus had a very short amount of time to accomplish his mission outside of being the sacrifice, dying for us. I think the people knew the God, the judge, God, the powerful, God, the almighty. I think they had a kind of an idea of who he was, but I don't think they knew who God the Father was. And I think Jesus told that story, said, look, I'm going to tell you what he's like. This is the heart of God the Father. And I'm going to tell you a story so you guys can understand what it's like. And I always see the picture I feel like I see the Father at the window, looking out the window every day. When's he coming home, man? Just waiting. Finally, he sees him. Boom. And it says in the word, he ran. He ran. And you could see the son trying to come up with all the excuses. And he was like, you don't have to say a word, man. I'm just glad you're right here. And man, once you experience that, and that's the heart of your father and all that. My dad didn't have to explain himself to me after that. I didn't need to hear anything, any of that. And so, man, that just knowing that the heart of the Father, and then that teaches us about what type of father we should be, and to pass that on to our kids and teach others about that.
Amen, brother. For me growing up, I looked at other men to try to figure out what that looked like to be a man, right? Where did you kind of piece that together? Was it through other men? I mean, obviously it's a try and fail, finding,
Yes.
and I still fail to this day, but how did you learn how to become a man
Oh,
without having a dad around?
no, that's a great question. When in 1993, when I gave my heart to the Lord, I worked for a guy named Bobby Wallace, who was awesome. Like I learned a lot from him because heck, he was a father to 100 guys. Watching him work, how much he cared about the kids. On the side, though, we had this coffee group that I would go to every day and talk about fellowship, man, and how important it is. And in that coffee group was guys at every age level, all the way up to 70 years old. He had grandchildren. Then there was guys in there that were 50. There was guys in there that were 40. There was guys in there that were 30. There was guys in there that were in their 20s. And we would sit around and just talk about being a father. I wasn't a husband yet, but they would tell me stories. And I learned listening to all of the stories, how to be a father, a husband, a grandfather, all of that from that coffee group, and we did that probably for 3 years straight. It was awesome.
Dude, and you know what I love about that is the fact that you surrounded yourself with other men, and I could listen to the grandfatherly type guys all day long,
Oh man.
and like you said, and I try to encourage men all the time. It's, man, share your story with your kids. Your kids, I think all of us, even as adults, we have this innate curiosity to know more about our old man. What made him who he was? Who were his best friends growing up? All those type things. And I know you saying in that 2-year period, having those conversations, learning more about your father, how important was that for you to really understand, the whole situation?
Oh man, I learned so much from him because he was so private, because he just never opened up to me ever. I, I'll give you an instance. I I asked him to be my best man in my wedding, and I was 28 years old, 28, and so it was like 2 nights before we were getting married, and me and him were going to go on a walk. We go on a walk, and we didn't really talk about a lot. He was very quick, with the conversations, very short, boom, it's over with. And he said, "Hey, man, I got to tell you something." And I was like, "All right, what you got?" He said, "You have a brother, and he lives in Colorado, and I'm trying to find him right now." I'm 28 years old, and I find out I got a brother, Paul.
How cool is that?
Awesome, awesome guy.
Yeah.
Right? But that's just a story to show you how my dad was like. He just didn't open up. He was just a very personable, he wasn't personable. I mean, like that. He wasn't open. He just was very quiet to me and his kids, But then those 2 years, I'd say, "Dad, tell me about the Navy," because my dad served in Vietnam on the USS Kitty Hawk. "Dad, tell me about the Navy. Tell me about that ship. Tell me this. Tell me." And I got to know my dad. I got to know my dad in those phone calls, and it was awesome.
Dude, I love it. From being a husband standpoint, and I know you said you had that group of men, is that also where you learned how to love your wife and how to be a husband?
Watching her dad, his name is Harold Coomer, and he was pastoring a church, so I got a chance to watch him, which was great. I had several older friends through that coffee group that were married, and in those coffee groups we would discuss, okay, this is what you need to look out for. This is what's coming down the road in your marriage 1 year out, 1 year in, 2 years in, 5 years in. And I kind of got a sense from them what to kind of expect, and what a Christian, because they were all Christians, what a Christian marriage the expectations, all of those things. And that's where I learned mostly.
What's been your biggest struggle as a dad, and what have you learned from that?
Okay, man. So being patient. In my job, I have got to learn, and I'm learning every day. In my job, it's okay, you say this gets done, let's go immediately, boom. And then when you come home and you're dealing with a 10-year-old and, you tell him to get off Xbox in 5 minutes and he's like, yeah, give me another 10 minutes. Like, no, get off right now. Yeah, you're like, okay. Man, like, no, really, it's a struggle for me because I want to treat him like one of my players and go, no, you're doing exactly what I tell you to do, and you're going to do it right now. And so, that's probably been the toughest, is to learn to have patience. And here it is, man. We got to let our kids fail at stuff. And oh my gosh, that's been absolute hardest, is to know that he's going to fail at something by the way he's going about doing it. And, you try to jump in and help him. He's like, I got it. And go, okay. And you just sit back there and watch him fail. But that's how they learn. And that has been the hardest thing, is taking my hands off of him and letting him fail.
One of the things too that I think I've learned, especially over the last few years, is I see more of trying myself to father my daughters in the way God fathers me. And I look at the grace and I go, wow, the grace that he has given me over the years. And I know many times he's sitting up there just going, I've joked about this before. He's sitting up there with his hands in his head, or his head, his hands going, Finch, not again. We've gone over this 1,000 times. but I look at that in my girls too, because I think early on I wasn't that guy that gave my girls grace. I was so stuck on, I'm your dad. You do it the way I say you're going to do it because I'm your father. It was that kind of just crazy, kind of over the top authority deal. Is there been those moments where you've understood grace in the sense from a fathering standpoint for your son?
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, it's like whenever I start to go over the top on, getting on to him about things, and I start thinking, how many times has God been patient with you on that sin in your life? How many times has God pressed upon you to deal with, maybe your anger or your, and, you failed. All right. And so that has helped me tremendous. Like, I don't see how you can be a great father without understanding that relationship between your heavenly Father, because that's, like you said, that's where you learn grace. That's where you learn patience. So yes, I totally get that.
Brother, I know you've probably got so many different stories through the years. Give me a story or two of just some moments special moments that you never forget in your coaching career.
Oh, my coaching career? Oh man. Yes, I got some good ones. Try to, I'll never forget in 1993, the year that I had became a Christian at the University of North Alabama. And I was that guy, John, that I always came in second place in everything I did. It was almost like there was some barrier there that I just couldn't get over the hump. I always came in second place. I was never good enough to ever win. And it literally drove me crazy, to the point where I now expected to lose when it came to that moment of winning or losing in any type of competition or anything. And so we're in the national championship in 1993, and we have a 10-point lead going into, there was 2 minutes left in the game. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to win the national champion. This is the first time I've ever won anything in my whole life. And as soon as that came out of my mouth, we blew that 10-point lead in about 35 seconds. It was the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen. Right. And then, I remember getting up, and I remember looking up at God, and I remember going, I knew it. I knew it. And then about that time, we miraculously came back, won the national championship in the last seconds. And it was one of the most exciting things I've ever seen. And I remember getting up, and I was ready to run down the steps and go celebrate with everybody on the field. And I know some people think you're crazy when you say you heard from God, but I distinctly heard God speak to me, and he said, sit down. And I sat down there while everybody was celebrating down in the middle of the field, and said, look what I can do. Look what I can do. It's not you. Just look what I can do. Not that God goes out and wins football games when we pray and all of that stuff, but he wanted me to know that part of my life where you're always going to come in second place, that's over. All right. This is a whole new life for you starting this year, 1993. This is your whole new life. And from that point forward, man, it's been amazing. We went on to win 3 straight national championships at the time. Nobody in the history of college football had ever done that at a scholarship institution. And just did think we went 41-1 over the next 3 years. So I got my share of winning and coming in first place after that. But I'll never forget that moment right at the end of that game when God spoke to me in that moment. It was
Dude,
awesome.
What a powerful story, man. And you know what? When you're talking about that second place, the abandonment thing with our dads, I think, and this is a place I still struggle at, the unworthiness, the guilt, the shame, all that stuff, right? And the enemy knows that we're weak there, and that's our spot. And so he continues to dig at that, right? And so helping men understand in a lot of cases that, man, there's some stuff there that we've got to be able to work through and be prepared to battle, because it's not going to stop. Even after you forgiving your dad, I mean, it's something I continue to struggle with, the unworthiness and shame and all the other stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's just like in football, man. Once an offense finds out the weakness of the defense, well, here it comes, like nonstop until you stop it. And it's the same thing with the thoughts from the enemy, those thoughts of unworthiness, the thoughts of you're a loser, you're not the winner. All of those things flood your mind, the negativity, all of those things. And so you have to constantly prepare for that. The thing that you learn is you learn to recognize it. Once you recognize where it's coming from, now I can build a game plan against it. And that's where, the relationship with God, you start learning the game plan of the enemy. You start learning how to combat. You start learning how to expect, okay, this is where the attack's going to come from. You recognize it, and then you're able to do battle.
And you mentioned a while ago too, I think one of the things that I spent most of my life doing was trying to prove to a dad who had been dead for many years that I was going to be successful.
Yeah.
Right? There's that drive and determination that you're going to prove him wrong because he decided to leave or whatever that story is. But there's this drive, and I see it in a lot of very successful men. That, man, that drive and determination is so overwhelming because of that desire to prove to an old man that left or whatever that they were going to be successful without him.
That's right. And what happens is, like I said, that drive, it helps you to become successful, but you got to watch out because it'll become a habit, and it'll start getting into areas of your life that's counterproductive, and it works against you. And I love the part of your video where you started, where people were talking about being a poser, and I think that's the thing where you combat this is you got to be transparent. You got to be transparent with your friends. You got to be transparent with your wife. You got to be transparent with your son, especially. And hey, son, I'm sorry. I lost my temper. This is why. I wish I wasn't that way. I'm really working on it. I really want God to change me. I'm sorry. You were still wrong, but but you know what I mean? I went about it the wrong way. And just being honest and just being transparent, I think that starts to melt that hardness a little bit that you get where it's the win at all cost mentality.
Dude, being real with my girls and them knowing my own struggles with what I've been through and struggles with depression and stuff that, I talk about, they see that I'm human. I'm not perfect, but man, you know what? I love them. And they know that, right? And that covers a lot of our mistakes and mess ups. They know we love them. So,
right.
dude, I love it. Brother, I could listen to you. We're on the same page, man. What does college football teach a young man about life?
Oh, wow. Time management for one. College football, back when I played, compared to now, it was so easy as far as your time. Now, I thought the game itself, practices were longer, harder, more physical because, we just went out there and hit till there was nobody left to hit anymore. Right? And now they have all these rules. You're not allowed to hit on certain days. You're not allowed to have 2 practices. But what we do is we demand so much of their time. Now all of their summers are taken up, where when I went to school, you said, okay, coach, I'll see you in July or the beginning of August. Hand me my little conditioning manual. I'll go run the mile. My 2 months I'm off in the summer. And now you can require them to be there the entire summer long. Some of these guys are getting like 2 weeks off, and then Christmas. That's about it. And other than that, they're training for football. And they have to be over at the football office. They got to be at their academic responsibilities. So time management. And that's why I would hire a football player or a college athlete in a heartbeat if he was qualified for the job that I had open, because they know time management. They know how to be on time. And then also how to handle adversity. These kids, they're 18 to 21, some 22, but the pressure they're under, social media, the tweets they get when they fail out in front of everybody. If you're a kicker and you miss a field goal and you're at, like a big school and it's on national TV, do you realize what he's getting bombarded with in social media? And a quarterback, a head coach, an offensive coordinator. I live that, being an offensive coordinator. Everybody hates you. But like being able to handle that pressure and handle that adversity, they are so prepared to leave college and go out and be successful in the world compared to somebody that doesn't experience any of that.
Yeah, just the commitment level too. The commitment and dedication to the sport, I know, has got to be. When I was in college, I remember I'm a fairly good sized guy. People would say, "Hey, did you play ball?" And I was like, "Man, I had a hard enough time staying on the books." I can't imagine, even back in my day, playing ball and studying, and it was hard enough for me just to pass. So, is that the biggest change you think you've seen over the years? What fascinates me with coaches is those that have been successful at all the various levels for so many years because of all the changes and the adaptations that have happened. Is social media probably the biggest of all those that you've seen through the years?
Yes, and it's not even close, and because everybody has access to you if you allow them by getting on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the number one thing is social media and recruiting, how we go about recruiting. I could talk on that for a long time. I might get myself in trouble, so I'm not going to say too much about recruiting, but
yeah,
the where it's headed and all of that stuff. And, I just think that kids are in a vulnerable age at the ages of 15, 16, 17 while they're being recruited by these men. And, I just think you ought to tell them the truth. I think that at those ages, they need to hear the truth. And you know how it is. Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth. They want to hear how great everything is.
Yeah. Has there been, and I know you've probably coached, man, so many different, very talented players, and has there been a moment or two with just some players that you remember that you'll never forget?
Yes, there was one particular player who was a second team guy. I'm not going to share his name. I don't want to embarrass him, but he was a second team player, and he was he just it was hard for him to get over the hump, to kind of catch up with the starters and be a guy. And he always wanted to be the guy, and he wanted to be known as one of the guys, and he just could never quite get there. And you know, he experienced a lot of tough times coaching and failing, and you know, and we coach him hard and getting coached really, really hard. And he got in a game in a very crucial time at one of the places that I was at, because the starter was tired, man. We had just gone like a bunch of plays in the row, and we were in a 2-minute situation. And so here we go. This guy comes out onto the field, not a whole lot of confidence, a lot of people having confidence in him. And there goes the pass to him in the biggest moment of all. And he made one of the greatest catches I've ever seen out on a football field, and dove completely out over his shoulder this way and caught an amazing catch. And it helped us win the game, and we won the championship because of that. Holding him and both of us crying like two little kids for like about 15 minutes out in the middle of the field as everybody else was celebrating and running, because I know that feeling that he had, that I'm always the second place guy. I can't ever get there. And he had his moment, and I was there to share that moment with him. And man, couldn't be more proud of the guy.
Dude, I love it. And you know what, man? I thank you in all the college coaches for what y'all do. We talked about this a little bit before. The influence coaches had on me growing up, it was that they would step in as that father figure, even if it was for a temporary time, and just learning from them. Not knowing at the time, I'd be ticked off at coaches a lot. Not knowing they were trying to get the best out of me, right? But it did get the best out of me. And so handling all that, dude, I greatly appreciate everything you guys do, man, and the influence that you have. As we wrap up, a couple last questions. What's the best thing about being a dad?
The best thing about being a dad, I love it when he depends on me, because there was a time when I wanted to depend on somebody. Yeah. And I get to be that for him.
Dude, that's it. That says it all right there, brother. It says it all right there. If you've got a new dad sitting in front of you and he says, "Hey, coach, give me some game-changing advice," what are you going to tell him?
Time. That's all they want. Don't worry about buying them anything. You could get a cardboard box. And you and him, if you're spending time with him, you'll find a way that'll be the most memorable time in his life, with you and him in a cardboard box. He'll find something. But that just time. Put your phone down, which I got to tell myself every single day. You're not going to get that time back ever. And just time. Spend time with him.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I think, one of the quotes I put out there is, you only have one shot at being a father. You know, and that's a reminder to me too, because I'm like you. I struggle at times, and sometimes my wife reminds me, "Honey, you know, put the phone down."
That's right.
Or come out of your office or whatever. But it's good to have a good wife too that holds you accountable, because I get caught up in stuff all the time, and I'm like,
no question.
Yeah. Brother, I appreciate you, man. I know you could be 100 other places tonight, and the fact that you took this time to hang with me, dude, says a lot. And I really do
Yeah.
really appreciate you, man.
I wouldn't have missed this for the world, man. Thank you so much, John, for having me on. I appreciate you.